Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us. It's another of our virtual events, and we're delighted to have Katie Pumphrey with us this evening, or lunchtime for her, I guess, and evening for us and anyone else in the UK. And Katie featured in our September issue. She was on the cover. Was that swimming across Boston Harbour? I think that picture was.
That photo, it was in Baltimore's harbor, right by our aquarium.
Baltimore Harbour.
Yeah.
And Rowan from the Outdoor Swimmer team, she was the one who did that interview and spoke to Katie. So I'm going to be handing over to Rowan, who will be live interviewing Katie and talking to her, chatting about her swimming, her artwork, and her activism. And we welcome questions from you. If you've got a question, pop it in the chat. You can have your video on or off. The meeting is being recorded, so it's up to you whether you want to keep your video on or off. Please keep your mics on mute unless you're actually asking a question, otherwise we get feedback. So Rowan and Katie, over to you.
Right then, thank you, Simon. Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for joining us tonight from your gallery, from your exhibition, which from poolside, as Katie said, which is fab, and we will talk about that in a little bit. But we're outdoor swimmers, so I wanted to start off by talking to you about outdoor swimming. You have got a very impressive swim CV. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have done and what you do in the water?
Yeah. I mean, most recently, hello, by the way, good evening. It's afternoon, quite rainy here in Baltimore. So recently I swam the English Channel for the third time, which was wonderful and brutal and everything that the channel offers. I started swimming as a kid. I was swimming, swim team and year-round swimming, and loved the sport immediately. I started when I was 5, and really got into open water when I decided to study painting for my degree. And that experience of going to art school, not having a collegiate swim career, pushed me towards kind of seeking out a goal. And I wanted something to work towards. And so I found a local swim, the Chesapeake Bay swim, which is 4.4 miles, whatever that is in kilometers. And that swim's pretty brutal also. It's definitely not a beginner swim. And I had no idea what I was getting into. It's a point-to-point swim. I've done it many times since. It's in its like nearly 40th year. It's an incredible swim. So if you're ever in the States, I highly recommend. It happens the second Sunday in June every year. And this year first coming year, it's starting at sunrise. So it should be really pretty. But that swim, I thought like point to point, stay in the middle of this span. So you're swimming between two bridge spans, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, which it tops most charts of like a terrifying bridge to drive over, but it's super cool to swim under. And the rules of the swim is essentially like stay within the spans. If you go outside the spans, they pull you. And about 600 swimmers do it every year, so it's a busy swim, but it spreads out quickly. And I learned very fast that open water is so much more. The bridges are not just lane lines, and the tide and the winds and the currents and the waves threw me all over the place. So I think I was 21, 22 when I did it the first time, and I swam the last like hour diagonally left, trying not to get pushed out onto the sand, and thought like, oh my gosh, I have so much to learn in the sport. And this was in 2010, and I climbed out. The first thing I said to my mom was like, oh my gosh, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I would like to do it again. How many times can I do it? And so then the next year I did a double that length kind of swim with a kayaker, and I really loved that like team element. And then little by little, kind of every year, I did a slightly longer swim, and then I set my eyes on the English Channel. which I said out loud for the first time that I wanted to do it in 2013. I booked a boat, 2 years ahead of time, and my first channel swim was 2015. Yeah, so many stories in every single channel swim, but I've learned a lot of lessons since. I've since done the English Channel 3 times. I've done the Catalina Channel twice. I've done the swim around Manhattan once in 2018. I am interested in a double at some point. I was just on a boat as a crew member for a Manhattan swim with a swimmer I coach, and she finished at night. That view around Manhattan at night was so cool. So I think a double would be really fun to swim through the night there. But and I love revisiting swims. I know not everyone's into that, but I love it. I think there's something quite magical about revisiting a swim with a little more knowledge, or a lot more knowledge, and a lot, or sometimes a little less fear. You have a lot less fear when you know what you might be approaching. So yeah, I think my CV has gotten long and is continuing to grow, but it's a lot of repeating as well. And then the big swim recently that I think brought my name and Baltimore to the world stage was my 24-mile, just about 40-kilometer Bay to Baltimore swim, which was from that very same Chesapeake Bay bridge to Baltimore's Inner Harbor. So it was 13 hours, 54 minutes, a swim that had never been done so from the Chesapeake Bay into the Patapsco River. So kind of going from like brackish into fresh river. And it was also championing decades-long efforts to make the Patapsco River swimmable and our harbor swimmable, which Baltimore, I'm sure some of you have heard of the city of Baltimore. It is a wonderful place to live, an incredible place to visit, and our harbor is truly beautiful and has greatly improved. So being able to champion all of that work and advocate for clean water for our city, for everyone, through that swim was really quite amazing. So that swim was definitely among one of the hardest ones I've ever done, but I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And you've said a little bit about why it was so important to you. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, the channel swim, of course, is a swim that's been done hundreds of times. There are ways to do it. There are pilots that you can hire. And we talked a little bit about this in our interview. How do you plan a brand new swim that's never been done before?
Yeah, planning a swim that's never been done before is it's so many logistics. And even when I'm like and I've planned a number of swims for the first time. So the Bay to Baltimore was definitely the most logistics I've had to deal with, especially through very busy waterways, past a very busy port, and into like a smaller and smaller and smaller waterway as we went. And there were so many people involved. So the biggest thing I can suggest if you're starting a swim is make a list and then make 55,000 more lists. And so make sure you're checking all the boxes. The most important thing is to start with is a boat, right? That you have a support boat with you, that you have a team with you. How many people do you need? I think kind of bare minimum is like 3. Plus your boat captain. Do they need a second person to trade off with? Do you have an observer? Do you need a second observer if it's going to be the first swim ever? Who are you reporting this swim to if you want it recorded in history? And then from there, I think I also visit why am I doing this? Do I want to share it with people? Why do I want to share it with people? And then developing a team to make that happen. So for the Bay to Baltimore, one of the questions I kept revisiting was, how will this serve Baltimore? How can I uplift the city and also uplift all of these organizations that are making this swim possible? So I'm one person and I want to, tell my story and connect people and anyone to the swim. And I think sports have a way of engaging conversations in a unique way. So that was, kind of a power in there. And so through that, I think then I got to champion, nonprofit organizations like Waterfront Partnership here in Baltimore, and Mr. Trash Wheel, which if you're unfamiliar, is an icon here. And, all of these different programs that are doing so much, but maybe aren't getting front page news as they should. So sports, I think, and athletes have a way to kind of bridge that gap. So among my lists were kind of that kind of stuff. And then one of my questions I also kept revisiting was, how do I bring art into the swim? So I, made a list of artists that perhaps could collaborate or make something or connect. So among them, a Baltimore-based illustrator, Sarah Bolton, she's amazing, hire her, designed a swimsuit for me, which has Baltimore and Maryland icons on it. So different images, and like our Maryland crab, our state fish, the rockfish, the Baltimore flag, all different in Baltimore colors. And then I paired also that with a local screen printer who hand printed my suit, as well as a fiber artist, Close Call Studio. She's also awesome. Follow her. Close Call Studio made a custom bunting banner that hung on the side of the boat that said Baltimore. So it was just like all of these little nods and all of these ways to connect, the city and these organizations and uplift artists. And so those were all kind of all on my to-do list as well.
Amazing, amazing. It'd be great if you could put those names in the chat maybe in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those artists, that would be really good. You also had a massive, like when you were planning this swim, there was a massive bridge collapsed that delayed the start of the swim. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you navigated it?
Yeah, so I think when I say that like so many people were involved in creating the Bay to Baltimore swim and making it happen, I mean hundreds of people, which also goes to show how powerful it is to connect with your community. So we, I'd partnered with Waterfront Partnership. I talked to the mayor's office here in Baltimore. I had done all of these things. We were getting ready to announce the swim, and my intentions to do it. And then our key bridge collapsed, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which is really in the Patapsco River, was like the landmark gateway to the city. It's been standing and part of our landscape for a long time and a huge part of the community, and like literally, connecting communities and a lot of industry, especially our port, and so many ways that our city thrives. So when a tanker hit one of the pylons and it collapsed, which was like incredibly heartbreaking, that impacted, and like the waves that went out, it's still being incredibly felt, obviously, because the bridge is not there anymore. For this swim, that put a huge question mark into everything, paused everything. It paused my seeking funders and sponsorship to make this one happen. It paused that like boat connection that I had, because now their industry and their season was impacted because they were a charter boat. And now they were either stuck on, one side or the other. But kudos to the state of Maryland and Baltimore City, and the Coast Guard, especially. I mean, and so many people, like their cleanup efforts to clear the river, give access to our port, was incredibly swift. That obviously, that bridge collapse was also heard around the world. And there was huge conversations about whether my swim should happen, right? That Baltimore just took this huge hit. And I was pretty adamant that I thought it needed to happen, that I thought, Baltimore already gets a bad reputation, despite being a thriving, charming, art-filled, great food, wonderful, beautiful place to be. And then this was another negative news piece. And the backlash from the Key Bridge collapse was also really heartbreaking. And so I was just adamant that not only did our city needed to be uplifted and highlighted, but that also our Patapsco River is swimmable now. We have reached this milestone, right? This has been decades of work and doubt and negative relationships with our waterways, and no, we can't wait another year. We have to celebrate this and share this. And of course we need a win, and of course we should share this. So, I think that like you have to just kind of keep championing. And I think no matter what you're doing and whatever swim you're trying to do or whatever you're trying to do in life, my biggest suggestion is always you have to be your own biggest fan, and whoever you can uplift and bring with you along the way, it's gonna happen. So luckily, the Coast Guard Sector Maryland and all the partners that I've been in touch with were pretty supportive. And you don't, to do a big swim as a singular swimmer, right? You don't need necessarily, depending on where you are, you don't need permission to swim in a public waterway. So before the Key Bridge, I didn't really need a permit. I didn't need a permit, and I didn't really need permission. But you do want to be in communication, right? Safety, again, is like the biggest thing. And I'd presented my swim to like the pilots around the port, and lots of people knew about it. But then suddenly, when I'm asking if the Key Bridge is cleared, will I be able to swim through? Then I had to ask a lot more permission. And the answer for many weeks was, we don't know. We don't know if it's safe. We don't know if we're okay with that. We don't know. So it did push the swim back about 6 to 8 weeks from our original window. And I went from kind of like the most perfect swim window chosen based on water temperature, air temperature, tide, general predictions all the time, to I'll take whatever I can get, right? And so I ended up, I planned the swim for early May when the water would be, kind of like English Channel temperatures for me, very my wheelhouse. It was significantly warmer. So instead of kind of mid 60s Fahrenheit, I'm so bad at my conversions.
We talked with us last time, didn't we?
I know. It ended up being like 82 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit, which is warmer than pool.
I think it's 28 degrees centigrade.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
And then even like hotter air temperature. So it was just like the hottest I've ever been in my entire life. And so I knew that going into it, that was going to be the challenge. And my team, we prepared for it. We like took safety precautions. I drank way more water than I normally do. Like it was my job. And, luckily we had a great day within my new window. The one day where it was like a slightly less hot, not much, but I'll take it. And we had low wind. So it turned out to be a beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. And hundreds of people came out, news followed. I mean, it was just one of the most wild experiences I've ever had. I mean, swimming, you all know, usually you're out there and it is very quiet. You are often on your own. If you're swimming next to a boat, you have those people, but it's usually a very isolated experience. And this was very much not. So it was nuts. But I'm really glad that it happened.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I love that photo of you. You do actually look like you're quite hot when you're on the boat with your cheering.
So hot.
And of course, what's really important for you talked about how important it is for Baltimore specifically, and I actually told a friend of mine who used to live in Baltimore a couple of decades ago about this, and she was staggered that you swam in Baltimore Harbour, which shows how far it's come. But it's also really important for cities, and you are an ambassador for Swimmable Cities now. Can you tell us a little bit about, why is it so important to have open water swimming spaces in urban areas?
Yeah, the Swimmable Cities International Charter, it's a new charter that's come to be really since the Paris Olympics and since that conversation over water quality and access to swimming in our urban waterways, right? And Swimmable Cities has done so much in such a short amount of time. So when I got the chance to tell more about my Beta Baltimore at their first summit in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, it was just amazing. Swimmable Cities is really, they're championing your right to swim, our rights for clean water and access to our waterways. and uplifting not only the sport element of that, right? Connecting with, how can we create these swims? How can we invite swimmers to be a part of it? But also the recreation part. And they're kind of building it all off of connecting individuals such as myself, or people that, organizations that swim clubs and swim groups, with nonprofits and organizations that are kind of working in sectors all around it, whether it's directly related to swimming, or maybe they're on a science side of clean water, or maybe they're looking at oysters or anything that's kind of like in the neighborhood, and then also our city government. And that we need everyone to be in touch. So Swimmable Cities, I think, has been really smart of how they're working with individuals. I did sign the charter as a co-athlete. Organizations can sign the charter, and more cities are signing the charter, and they're getting ready to announce even more cities signing the charter, which is really great. But being now an ambassador for Swimmable Cities that is like reaching so many countries and so many people has just been really wonderful, and something I did not see coming. And that's part of the Beta Baltimore Swim has truly changed my life. But Swimmable Cities, I think, it's highlighting all of the things we already know, right? You live near water, and we're like, I want to go in it. How do I do that? How do I safely do that? How do I bring people? How do you make it safe for the inexperienced swimmer? How do you make it safe for the wildly experienced swimmer in a waterway that is susceptible to all of those elements? Here in Baltimore, our Pasco River looks very calm, but it is tidal and lots of movement is happening. And I think they're trying to also, work with everyone that's educating about not only open water and our waterways and how they're all connected to everywhere, but also, just more about where you live and what's the history of that, who has lived there before you, and how do we celebrate everything about it. So the UN recently gave a shout out to Swimmable Cities, which is very exciting. And I think it's only going to get bigger and bigger, because I think it's really powerful when we all acknowledge that water can change our lives.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And also, you in urban areas, it's it's about equality as well, isn't it? And it's about there's such a higher concentration of people in a city than in the countryside. So, are there ways, are they looking at ways of making access more equal and more democratic is the word I'm trying to look for, making it more democratic so more people can access water?
Yeah, I think that has to be part of the conversation, right? Because we need water, we need drinking water, right? And where does that come from? We need access to the water to experience this, right? Our right to swim and the right, to nature is important. I think every city is unique, and every country is unique. That I think in some places, I think swimming literacy, the change is really drastic. Here in Baltimore and in the States, our swimming literacy is very low in general. Especially when it comes to minorities. And when you look at the history of swimming in a lot of places, especially here, segregated pools plays a huge role in that. Our racial disparities and the history of how we've accessed water, whether it's a pool or our river, is deeply impacting families and generations and communities. And so we have to, as we talk about how we access our water, we have to talk about how that becomes accessible for everyone across the board, and safe for everyone. So here in Baltimore, one of my hopes, in addition to having more swims for athletes, 1 mile, 2 mile, 5Ks, 10Ks, I would also love to see a public swimming area. And a big question is, so how do you do that? How do you do that safely? How do you educate everyone about open water, especially when you can't see the bottom in a brackish river? And how do we address all of this history, right? And all of these issues that like all of our cities and countries are carrying, especially in a time that's really challenging. So I think the first thing is the more we talk about it, the better. And so my hope here in Baltimore, I'm creating a nonprofit called Baltimore Open Water Swimmers, BOWS for short, that will not only host those 1 and 2 10K swims, and eventually will be also the host of the Beta Baltimore Swim, which I'm hoping to run in 2026 with 5 swimmers. But BOWS will also host, group swims and training swims and all sorts of fun things for athletes and swimmers. But my hope is that organizations like BOWS can also partner with Learn to Swim programs, with water safety programs, right? There's so many orgs out there that are already doing it and doing it well. And I think the more that we kind of talk to each other, and the more that cities talk to each other, like when I went to Rotterdam, which is Baltimore's sister city, there's so much in common, right? The city is very similar. It's very industrial, lots of water, access everywhere, huge port. And the difference with swimming wise is that their swimming literacy was so high. And so I think looking at programs that are working well for them, of how they're tapping into Learn to Swim programs in schools, right? How do we change legislation so that becomes part of our education system? How do we change legislation so that access is there more fairly and for everyone? And I think the more that we talk about it, the more that you get more people involved, right? We need to just keep talking to smart people and figure out how to do these things. Because I think a lot of us are so passionate about what we do, and we're passionate about what we've experienced. We want to share that, right? You go swimming in a beautiful place and you're like, oh my gosh, you got to come. I think we need that, but we need to do that while acknowledging everything that we haven't done well, and hopefully start kind of writing our course a bit, and in a way that isn't scary, and it is inviting to people, because I think, as we all know, again, water, it greatly changes our lives and impacts our lives. And the more that people are out in nature and the more that they are in water, and then the more that they care about it. So then we kind of go back to like how do we care for our ecosystems in nature, right? It's like this constant circle.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what was my next question was going to just be about, water quality being the other big issue. And what's really interesting is how, I mean, I don't know if she was exaggerating, but my friend who lived in Baltimore a couple of decades ago said that if you fell into in a harbour, you'd have to be hosed down. It was that bad. How has Baltimore come so far in cleaning up the water?
Yeah, so I think it's a kind of a multi-pronged approach, and I do think Baltimore is a great example. Baltimore, I think the harbor has come a long way, and there's been a lot of mismanagement of our waterways, a lot of mistrust in how that's handled, and I also think there's a huge like misunderstanding about the water, right? And I think, and like rumors like that, I hear all the time, right? I mean, people learn who I am, and then I swam in the harbor, and they're like, "And do you have a third arm?" I'm like, "It's in my pocket." No, I don't. And so a few things. So, like I said, decades of hard work. So a lot of organizations championing legislation to improve things. A lot of organizations rallying for those legislation changes, whether it's how we dispose of runoff, or how we dispose of various things, right? We need to have rules about it, about what we put in the water. But a big thing that Baltimore did, and this is a common problem with our industrial cities, is Baltimore is an older city. Right now, certainly not as old as cities in the UK, but old cities have old infrastructure. So Baltimore made a very wise choice after a lot of push for legislation changes and a lot of push for budget and management changes, they invested $1.6 billion in infrastructure improvements. We had and still have some parts of our sewer system that are old, hollowed out trees, right? Porous trees that are, from original sewer systems of very early Baltimore. And with old infrastructure, and not just trees, I mean, all sorts of other infrastructure issues, right? Of how things leak or how they're managed. And leaks and spills happen. And we've obviously gotten faster and better about cleaning it up. But as we make those improvements, we see improvements to the water, right? And then we add in like various oyster projects, right? So oysters are this like amazing organism that filters so much water. I recently visited an oyster farm in South Maryland and in Southern Maryland, and they said one of my favorite quotes about oysters, that the greater, no, I'm gonna get this wrong, the bigger an oyster farm gets, right? The bigger the industry gets, oyster farming, the greater positive impact it has on the environment. It's like the only industry that can say that, right? The bigger it gets, the greater environmental impact it has. Oysters are this, oysters, any bivalve, right? They're like such these like good filters. And the Chesapeake Bay and Pasco River here in Maryland used to have a ton of them. But because of that mismanagement, because of our, decades long of not caring for our waterways for a variety of reasons, we lost a lot of our wild oysters. So oyster farming and mussels and all these things that we're kind of bringing back into their native waterways, I think is really helping. So that pairing with also, we have a family of trash interceptors. I highly recommend a Google of Mr. Trash Wheel. So Mr. Trash Wheel is a Baltimore icon. He is a legend. He's also a trash interceptor. So Mr. Trash Wheel and his 3 friends, we have 4 trash wheels. They basically have a conveyor belt that gathers trash and debris from the river. Which, not only trash, but debris that's going to like clog waterways and create more issues and hurt our ecosystem, as well as how we travel through water. They basically gather up all that trash into a conveyor belt and it dumps into a dumpster. Mr. Trash Wheel was put out into the Pasco River at the mouth of the Jones Falls. So it's like coming from these streams into the river. He was put out in 2014. He was the first trash interceptor of his kind. So he's out in the river floating, gobbling up trash all day long. He was given googly eyes and the name Mr. Trash Wheel, so that people, again, would care about him, right? If it's just some machine out there, nobody cares. In a city like Baltimore, right, home of John Waters and all sorts of artists and quirkiness here, you put googly eyes and a name on it, like we're in. So there's also Professor Trash Wheel now. She has giant eyelashes. There's also Captain Trash Wheel, who uses they, them pronouns and lives in Masonville Cove in South Baltimore. And a pair of bald eagles live next to Captain Trash Wheel, actually. And then we also have Gwenda, the good wheel of the West. So Gwenda is on the mouth of the Gwen Falls stream. So these 4 trash wheels, invented by John Kellett of Clearwater Mills here in Baltimore, yay Baltimore, were the first of its kind, and now there are trash interceptors in all sorts of other cities around the world with their own names, and some of them have their own features as well. So there's so many things that Baltimore has done to improve our waterway, and it's been wildly impressive. We're seeing more clarity in our river. We're seeing more marine life, more wildlife. I did a training swim in June, and cow-nosed stingrays swam under me. So for those that are having some Baltimore connections, I saw in the chat, I saw a cow-nosed, that's why I got it tattooed on my arm, actually.
Amazing.
A cow-nosed stingray swam under me. And it's incredible. Right now, that doesn't mean that our waterways won't have setbacks. Right now, actually, in our harbor, we're experiencing a fish kill and a pistachio tide. right? So this especially is common in shallow waterways, which our river here is very shallow, as is the Chesapeake Bay. So as we're having seasonal changes, we're still having warm days, but starting to have cool nights. The density of the water changes as we cool that warm surface water, and it flips with the cooler water on the bottom, right? So this is sometimes when you go and you swim and you're like, why are my toes warmer than my hands? That's different. It's also sometimes when you're swimming and you might smell like a slight sulfur smell, right? So that is, and that's why we get a little bit of a green tint and why it's called a pistachio tide. That switch, that it's, you know, cold water, basically inversion, is stirring up some natural bacteria from the bottom of a riverbed. And as it switches and then it's exposed to sunlight, it smells a little bit like the sulfur. Now, in that process, it's not harmful to humans. So if you're ever swimming and you experience that, that's sometimes what that is. I do encourage checking with water quality no matter where you're swimming. But it's not great for fish because it zaps out all the oxygen. So that's why we start experiencing some fish kills, which happens in lots of waterways, but it especially is susceptible here in the fall. So I think the thing to remember as we're championing our waterways is also that it's not a straight line. We see improvement. It is swimmable, but we're going to have bad days. We're going to have setbacks of things. And that's why I just like to remind swimmers and newbies to the water that, you know, we still want to follow that rule no matter where you are, to not swim 48 hours after a heavy rain, right? Whether you're out in the country or in a city, all waterways experience runoff from farms, from cities, from sewers, from roads, from animals. You know, and that like heavy rain is also bringing debris that could hurt you. So we want to remember kind of that rule. So here in Baltimore, when I talk about that 48-hour rule, I think people think it's just because it's Baltimore and because our harbor is newly swimmable. But I'm like, no, that's the ocean as well. Like we should avoid heavy rains whenever we can. Because again, safety first.
That's amazing. That's really fascinating. Some of that, there's some stuff that I really didn't know about the switching around to the water. I do recognise that sulphur smell, definitely. That's amazing. And really interesting, and actually makes me think that we should all probably know a little bit more about our water and you know, and what's going on in it. Yeah, it's a good little reminder. So the thing I
Rowan,
really wanted to talk to
can
you
I
about
jump to a
last,
couple of the questions from the chat?
yeah,
There's
shall
a few
we?
questions that have come in.
I was going to ask Katie to talk a bit about her art, but yeah, should we ask some
Yeah,
not
there's a
art
couple of some
related
related
chat?
questions, and maybe we could move on to the art
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
cool,
after
that's, I'd
good
love
that,
idea.
if that's okay. Kate, you're such a great guest. And Rowan asks you a question, and then you just talk so knowledgeably about the swims, about your
Yeah, I
environment.
know, she's
It's
brilliant.
wonderful. And it's fascinating just listening to you and you know, having that perspective from the other side of the Atlantic where things are a little bit different. But so I'm really enjoying it. But and I think our other guests are as well. So there's a few questions that have come in. There's someone that actually lives in Columbia, Maryland, so just south of you, and they want to do the Bay Bridge swim, and they're asking specific advice about finding open water training opportunities. I mean, maybe they're looking for people to train with. I don't know. And asking for any tips for that particular swim.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Hey, Marylander. Love it. I have so many tips for the Chesapeake Bay swim. I think I've done it 5 or 6 times now, but I've probably coached 150 swimmers to do it by now. It is an iconic swim. So if you are a Marylander and you are a swimmer, I definitely say you have to have it on your list at some point. And if you are visiting the East Coast, highly recommend. As far as finding swimmers in the area, there are some great groups in Annapolis, but I would also recommend that you join bemorebose.org. Join the mailing list for Bose, the nonprofit that I'm creating. There'll be ways to become a founding member, and then you'll get invites to some of the training swims that I'm going to lead people on this spring as we lead up into the Bay swim. I am also a coach, so if you're looking for a coach, I have a roster of about 12 to 15 swimmers every year. So I'm always looking for, you know, anyone looking to tackle their first, you know, bigger swim, whether it's the Bay swim in that distance or even a channel swim. So there's a lot going on in my life, but I love coaching and working with different adults and nerding out about swimming and feeding my little coach heart. So it's a lot of fun. But big tips for the bay swim also: stay left. Generally, stay left. The tide will change and push you out. Generally, stay left. Usually that works. And also with any swim, and this definitely goes for the bay swim, listen to your safety director. If the race director or a safety director is telling you about the conditions that day, or they're giving you some tips of what shoulder to keep a buoy on or what site to look at, whether it's a landmark or a buoy in the distance or a boat that you might be having to pay attention to, make a couple notes. And I usually just kind of repeat that list in my head. Now, if you're doing a swim and you have like a kayaker next to you or a boat, that's where I like talk it out with them, right? Repeat some of those things to them. And then the more that you do swims, especially with a crew, but even without, I think just remind yourself of what are the things that you planned. Come swim day, that's not the time to make changes. That's another big recommendation, right? Stick with what you know. And odds are, if you're standing on a beach with hundreds of swimmers, they all came from a different place. They all trained a different way. And just remind yourself that whatever you did to stand there that day was the right thing for you. At the start line is not the time to question it. After you have safely finished the swim and hopefully you've had a fun time, then you can talk about like what you might change for the future. I've definitely finished a number of swims and been like, oh, well, that training wasn't exactly the thing I needed, or I'm going to make a little change, this or that. I think also just like connect with swimmers, right? Do this, ask questions, send a DM, to a swimmer that you follow on Instagram. Read all the articles that you can, but take everything with a grain of salt because everyone's experience is different. Everyone is different. And I think that's one of the most magical things about open water swimming. It is a lifelong sport. I'm 37, and I have definitely been saying a lot recently that I am just getting started, right? I know a lot of channel swimmers, especially women, into their late 60s that are still out there crushing it and breaking records. So while it is a lifelong sport and you can keep doing it forever, and the limit does not exist, you can also start at any time. So whatever your experience is in the sport and how you're getting there and what you're doing with it, everyone's background is different. So I think you got to just take all of the information you can. And I think that's really what I've done in the last 15 years as I've been in open water and pushing this distance, is just gathering as many pieces of knowledge as I can and then figuring out what works for me.
Yeah. You're obviously a very curious person and you feed that into your swimming. It's really nice to hear that. And there's another question about the swimmable cities and and I don't know whether you know this or not as an ambassador. I don't know how close you are to the founders and the organizers, but are they planning to build guidance for cities to follow and to share experiences from cities that are leading the way, perhaps? And
yes.
where can we find out about that?
Yeah, so if you go to the website for Swimmable Cities, which I believe is swimmableCities.org, there is a toolkit for cities. There's also a toolkit for organizations. As they have different days where host cities or organizations can get involved too, like they're having World Rivers Day. You can have host virtual or in-person events, host a swim. There's all sorts of ways to get involved, even if your city hasn't signed yet. So any way that you can fly the flag, right, of championing a swimmable city or championing the mission of the right to swim and the right to nature and protecting our waterways, the greater that message gets. So Swimmable Cities founders, I think they love kind of reminding people that they're not an organization or entity, right? They're there to like raise everybody else up. They're there to kind of collect us all. And it's not that we're not spreading like swimmable cities as the end all be all, right? We're already out there doing it. We need to like highlight what we're all doing and learning it better. That being said, Swimmable Cities doing incredible things with all of their partners, and check out their website, follow them on social media. In the UK, I hope that you saw Toby Robinson. He's also a Swimmable City ambassador. He was recently on with you all. Love that. He, was a 10K Olympian in the Paris Olympics from Great Britain. And he just did a swim, also partnering with Swimmable Cities and highlighting that message. So there's just so many fun things to follow, I think, through Swimmable Cities as well, and gather more information as a swimmer and as an org, and how you can be a part of it. And because it is kind of joining a mission, right? And joining and signing a charter, or even just being a part of it at all. You're basically joining like the coolest team of swimmer water lovers out there.
Yeah. Okay, I've got one more question from the chat, and one that came in before, and I'm going to roll them into one because I'm aware that Rowan wants to ask you about your art and about the wonderful things on display behind you. So one question is about what swims do you have planned for the future, and the other question is what specific training do you do for your long distance swims? And because we've only got 15 minutes left, whether you can sort of roll those two questions into one, and maybe talk about a swim you're going to do and how you're going to train for it, and then I'll leave Rowan to ask you about your art.
Yes. So future, right now, especially because I've had kind of a busy, exciting year since my Beta Baltimore swim in 2024. And I just swam the English Channel for the third time, eight weeks ago yesterday. I am now really focused on kind of getting a couple years set out, and then I can fill in the gap, which I find is helpful for, I don't know if any of you have experienced that, you train and work towards a swim and you reach that goal, and then there's kind of an aftermath, like a depression that comes after. And so now I know that that's coming with every swim, and how do I deal with that? How do I take care of my mental health? How do I feed my tired burnout monster and train accordingly? So I'm looking at 2027. I'd love to attempt a double around Manhattan. I'd love to experience a swim at night, which I haven't before. It looks beautiful. In 2028, I hope to return to the UK for 2 English Channel swims in the same season. So I'm hoping it's also being paired, my visit, with the Folkestone Triennial Art Festival, which I'm trying really hard to be one of the artists featured, and perhaps bring an installation to Folkestone. Before then, and how I'll keep training for things, I'm looking, my 2026 is really focused on getting bows off the ground and hosting those swims and championing Baltimore. So I'm really focused on kind of maybe taking a back seat as an athlete, but stepping forward, as a spokesperson and champion of this city and future swims. And how I train for these things, so I think it's definitely evolved as I've been in the sport. Most of the time, my fall and winter are really focused on technique, starting to push like interval sets and pace work, maybe with shorter workouts overall, but high intensity. Through kind of January, February, and this shifts and evolves a little depending on if I have a big swim in May or June, or is my big swim in July or August. So some of that shifts and changes. And if you're just getting into the distance of, a channel swim length, that's why I suggest working with a coach. And one of the things I do with my swimmers is we talk out what is a training plan that works for you, where you're coming from to where you want to go, and then what's happening in life that impacts that. So I'm a big fan of training and planning my training in a way that isn't making my life harder or the emotional toll of training more difficult, right? So I know that when I have a painting deadline, such as this, that I'm physically working a lot in the studio, right? That building canvases that are 9, 10 feet, 25 feet tall, that's physically demanding. So I try to plan my training weeks around that. So if I'm busy in the studio, it might be a lighter load in the pool. So the same thing goes if you have you have a work trip, or that things are stressful that month, or you have a lot going on with family. because it's graduation or because it's whatever. I always suggest like plan around the life, right? Don't force yourself to be miserable. There's no point. We do this for fun, right? We love the sport. So from kind of drills and pace speed work in the winter, towards late winter, February, March, then I start adding in distance. And I look at kind of 3 weeks climbing in yardage or meters, and then a week down. So also building in recovery, because we need it. I generally don't ever, I always make sure I have at least 1 day off. And in that day off, I'm also making sure that I'm like lounging on my couch. When you have busy days and it's stressful and you're working hard in the pool, making sure that you're sleeping, making sure that you're eating, making sure that you're hydrating, and that your feet are propped up. So in pool training, which most of my training ends up being in the pool just because the weather around here is so unpredictable, although I do get in like as many open water training swims as I can. For a big swim like the English Channel, I go up to about 60,000 meters a week. Wow. And maybe I hit that twice.
Okay.
But I hit like 40, 45, 50, 55 a couple times throughout that kind of climb in late spring, early May. Early summer, sorry. And then taper. And one of the things that I have found is so important is taper more than you think. Studies show, especially as we get older and especially women, tapering more is just as beneficial. I talk to a lot of athletes that only taper for or rest even, for like 10 days, 2 weeks. I have tapered up to 5 weeks. And when I say taper, I mean like rest. And sometimes if life is busy, that means that I didn't swim for almost a month. And I do that sometimes when I think it's better to prioritize sleep and rest than getting to the pool. Now, I do suggest that you get in the pool and stretch out in that time if that physically feels good and if mentally that feels needed. But I think rest is like such an underrated thing, especially when you're a month out or 5 weeks out from a big swim like that and you've been putting in all that training. Even if it's a swim like the base swim, you still need to rest and taper. The shorter swim, maybe it's a shorter taper. But we need time for our body to repair, and we need time for all that good chemistry to happen in our body so that come the day that you're standing at the start line that you feel raring and ready to go.
I'm sure we could talk about swimming and training and I mean, you've got so much sensible advice for everyone here for another hour at least, but we did promise you it would only be an hour, and we only have a few minutes left, and you've got some wonderful things in the room behind you and on the floor behind you, and I think Rowan wants to just ask you about that and share that with the people on the call as well before we wrap up. So I'll hand back to Rowan for a few final questions.
Thank you. I was just going to ask you to tell us a little bit about what's behind you. When I interviewed you, you had just got back from the UK from your English Channel swim, and you were just finalising things for this amazing exhibition. So in
Thank you.
5 minutes, can you show us a little bit of what you got there and tell us what it's about?
Yes, absolutely. So just to give a little tour, let me see if I can direct, there it is. Okay. So 2 paintings over here. Where's my finger? Okay. Smaller painting we have here, which is still quite large. It's called Three Graces. This painting is called Watson and the Shark. So all of the work in this show, which is called Swimming Pool, is pulling from my swimming experiences, incorporating images of swimmers and water and marine life and all sorts of different things. But exploring all of that through a bit of a play with art history. So some of these most of these paintings are pulling from compositions of historical paintings. So these two, my Three Graces there, are pulling from Rubens' Three Graces. And then the larger piece, Watson and the Shark, is pulling from John Singleton Copley's Watson and the Shark from 1778. So I'm using these competitions, but bringing in, contemporary swimmers and even stories from my swims. So Watson the Shark, that larger painting, is really showing my crew, and I'm Watson there in the water swimming. That's from my beta Baltimore swim. Now that story and that painting from John Singleton Copley is really a wild painting, and I could talk about that for another hour. But I recommend a Google of his Watson and the Shark. It actually hangs here in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. But basically, a lot of my work is and has been for a long time, has been pulling from my swimming experiences, using imagery from the water and from swimming to look at how we navigate our fears and anxiety, and how we push through, right? How we push forward, how we use humor and playfulness to process it, how we, make a joke when we're stressed or scared. And in these paintings, especially where there might be a shark or even, there we go, an alligator lurking below, while I'm not actually scared of these things when I'm swimming, I think they act as a wonderful metaphor for our anxiety that's kind of always lurking there. So in a lot of the work, there's also a ton of symbols and different shapes that are repeating. So I wanted a lot of repetition in this work. Definitely a call from the repetition of our hands, swimming and moving again and again and again, right? When we're making our way through the water. Swimming is definitely a sport of repetition. So I wanted to bring in the pattern, of pool tile and all of this movement of water and these changes in the horizon line and even these like blocks of color at the top of each composition. So a lot of these, you can see back there, a lot of these kind of big blocks of color are shifting and changing our perspective. And that is a big nod to when you're swimming through sunrise and into the afternoon and into evening, how the light changes, how your skyline changes, how that horizon line shifts, especially as you're like partially underwater sometimes. So all of this work is really, it's telling a lot of stories, and there's a lot of big ideas going on, but also a lot of small moments that draw you in. So these paintings are quite large, and I'll take you back there. Do one more, a little closer. Also, so you can see my installation here. I've created a pool. The water's fine. It is a bit shallow, so beware. During the opening reception, I also had an entire staff of lifeguards, which has been really playful and fun. The pool furniture, I'm inviting viewers to lounge. This painting back here, quite large. This one's called Washington Crossing the Delaware. So kind of an iconic painting here in the States, actually by a German painter, Emanuel Lutz, the original. This is obviously by me, but bringing in some whimsical clouds and again, like the pattern and all sorts of things going. So I'll show you a little closer, but yeah, this work has been kind of 2 years in the making. And if you see me for scale, it's quite large. And a lot of these figures are pulled from images of my crew during my swims, except for George Washington here. And this piece in feet is 25 feet wide, which I wanted to make a nod. I think swimmers will get it. I wanted to make a nod to 25 yards or meters pool. So a little connection there to short course pool swimming. But that's kind of a big rundown of the show. One more piece.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for taking
And this
us around.
piece, just for fun to finish it out here, is called The Queen of Hearts. and she spins. So a lot of whimsy in the gallery here, which I think is necessary in our lives, especially these days.
That's fantastic. I saw a picture actually on your Instagram of somebody turning it, and I wondered why that was, and now I know. That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't know if Simon, you've got anything to finish up with, but thank you so much. It's really interesting, and thanks for talking to us tonight.
Yeah, thank you. This has been so
Um,
fun. Follow me on social media. Reach out anytime with questions. I'm always happy to share. Swimkatie.com takes you to more information about my swims. It also links to katiepumphrey.com, which will show you more of my work. All of this work will be up there for you to enjoy and see from afar. And if you are ever in Baltimore, definitely reach out. I'd love to show you my city.
Thank you so
Amazing.
much. It's been a real pleasure to have you on one of our events here, and I can see there's lots of appreciation going on in the chat, and some of the emoticons rising up the screen. So I think everyone else has enjoyed it as much as I have. So thanks, yes, thanks so much for breaking up your day and joining us for an hour. And good luck with your future swims and your coaching and your art, and maybe hopefully see you when you're back in the UK for your 2 channel swims in a year.
Yeah,
In
absolutely. I'd love it.
2027?
2028 is my hope, but I do hope to visit before then.
Okay. And yeah, and thanks so much for the invite to Baltimore. I hope
Yeah,
someone
you'll love
takes you
it.
up on that.
I promise.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
All right.
Katie. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
y'all.
Cheers.
Have a good night.
Bye.